Good afternoon and a warm welcome from all of us at MRSI. Quickly, a bit about the MRSI. MRSI is a unique not-for-profit association of providers and buyers of research and insights. MRSI's role is to create awareness of the industry among public at large, as well as government, establish and promote professional standards, and provide a platform for professionals to engage and showcase their work and collaborate on common issues. For our session today, your hosts are Ashwini and I, Sundar Muthuraman. And today's webinar is part of a special set of webinars we set in progress in the context of the COVID-19 lockdown. The first one, which was a couple of weeks ago, was on understanding consumers at the time of COVID. And the focus there was to kind of understand what was happening around us, how consumers are changing. The second in the series, and the one that we are connecting for today, is about the new qualitative research playbook. And it gives us the opportunity to understand how the qualitative research community is gearing up to get us the insights we need in the context of all the constraints around us. And then, we have a third and the fourth in the series coming up shortly. The third would be on quantitative research and, how we are gearing up to deliver the insights and the new methods that are coming to play. And the fourth in the series would be to kind of understand how industries like us, equally impacted by COVID, are coping with the situation, and there could be things to learn for all of us. As I was mentioning, the context today is about understanding what's happening in the qualitative research space. We have with us today qualitative market research and insights leaders who have come together to share their perspectives. They are experts who have helped leapfrog qualitative research practices. Adapted to COVID-19 driven constraints, we are fast tracking truly path breaking methods. We are as a community, therefore stronger and ready for the new normal. I'm extremely delighted to introduce our distinguished guest speakers for today's session. Anjana Pillai from Quantum Consumer Solution, Sharmila Das from Purple Audacity, Paru Minocha from Kantar, Priya Lobo from Ormax, and Madhulika Khatiyar from Dragonfly. A warm welcome from all of us at MRSI and all the participants. I'm just wearing the hat as a market research user, and there are questions that I'm sure we want to answer, say, as a market research user at this point in time. And the question is, should I do this now? Is qual research the right way to go? And so on and so forth. And then, I'm also concerned that if as an organization I'm commissioning some research, I'm concerned about the safety of our interviewers and qual teams. But at the same time, I'm also hearing now that there are digital channels via which qualitative research is happening and happening well. So when I'm thinking aloud, maybe my first question is, question to our experts is, are we truly delivered to, are we truly geared to deliver qualitative research today? So I think that's probably the first question I would kind of lead in this discussion with, and pose it to Anjana, our panel expert today. Are we really in a place to kind of conduct qualitative research? How are we gearing up in these challenging times? Let me quickly introduce Anjana Pillai. Anjana started her career with Quantum over 20 years ago and is an award-winning qualitative researcher with extensive experience in categories cutting across foods, beverages, apparels, e-commerce, jewelry, and more. She's partnered several brands over the years, shaped their futures by marrying consumer insight with a lens of strategy and consulting. So Anjana, tell us, Are we truly there? What should we do? Are we in a position to run qual research? Over to you.
Thank you for that, Sundar. I'm just going to jump directly into the big questions that are being asked of us right now. One of the big questions that really comes up a lot is qualitative research even happening just now, or is it the right time to do qualitative research? The other is, what are the data collection methods that are being used? And are you proposing digital because we can't do face-to-face? Is it a compromise? What are the takeaways for qualitative research through all this? And finally, the million-dollar question: what lies ahead of us, right? So these are. I mean, there are many other questions as well. But what we try to do is take you through some of the larger, more prominent questions that are constantly being thrown at us during these times. Before I try to address these, let's look at the context. Let's examine what's happening with consumers and marketeers alike. And I think it's really clear that COVID-19 is a watershed event, right? Because it's not just a medical pandemic that we're looking at, but we're looking at a looming recession. It's a humanitarian crisis that we're facing. And needless to say, it's disrupted life and social order in many ways. And therefore, what's really happening is that there are new social, psychological, and cultural formations that are taking shape as a result of this. And there's a lot of complexity out there. And because of all this, there is a choice-making crisis that we see amongst both consumers and marketers. So how do I make the right choices? How do I make them with conviction? These are all questions that we're seeing today. So when we talk choices, what are the kind of choices? What are the kind of questions? I mean, if you're a marketer, you may be wondering if it's really the time to address consumer aspirations just now, or is it the time to focus on value? The other question that you may have is, what are consumers going to do? Are they going to turn to science, or are they going to, go back to good old faiths? Is everyone, are consumers only talking about the future? Is it only deep despair? How are they processing information? What's happening to families? How's masculinity and femininity morphing and changing in this context? There are many questions, many choices, and many decisions that we need to take, but a lot of lack of clarity just now, right? So moving on, I also want to say that there are many good reasons to say, let me just pause all consumer insight just now. Let me just, do this when things are more stable, when consumers are in a better frame of mind, and research budgets are being slashed. So there are many good reasons, like I said. But qualitative research is happening, and a lot of it is happening because of three big reasons. One of the foremost reasons being the fact that marketers realize that things are changing very fast, and if they need to be nimble and flexible to adapt themselves to changes that consumers are seeking, it's very important to understand what's changing in consumer minds, right? So that's a big reason why qualitative research is happening just now. The other reason really is that there is also realization that this is a crisis of opportunity. So as people change, there are new needs that are coming up. There are new opportunities for organizations to leverage. How do you position your products in the new atmosphere? How do you make the most of the circumstances to provide great value to consumers and thereby leverage these opportunities? And finally, there is also an understanding of the fact that while this is a big disruption in our lives, this is also going to lead to some long-term changes, right? So consumer attitudes and some of the consumers' attitudes and values will change forever. And therefore, there is a need to understand that, to be prepared for the long term. So these are all the various reasons why marketers are looking at qualitative research to provide solutions in the here and the now and in the future. What has been our experience so far as qualitative market research practitioners? What we find is that interest in participation, amongst respondents and consumers has definitely increased. There are some obvious reasons for that. I mean, people have more time now, they're able to make time for research, there's that. But we also find that because of the period of isolation that we've all seen, consumers also feel the need for some kind of connection and distraction. So there is willingness to participate, much greater willingness to participate in qualitative events today. And we also find that because there is a sense of powerlessness that a lot of consumers are feeling, and when they get an opportunity to input and provide feedback, there is that sense of control as well that they get. So overall, we're finding it much easier to recruit respondents in the current reality. Moving on, and digital acceleration has definitely happened. And I'm saying acceleration because it was always underway. It's not a new thing, but what's happening is that it's become much more faster today because of remote working, etc. But even from a consumer lens, what we see is that there is a great deal of comfort with regard to accessing devices. We also find that there is great degree of comfort with social interactions online, and therefore it seems like a great opportunity. Again, I want to underscore that while a lot of what we are doing just now is triggered by COVID-19, what is happening just now is going to be relevant way beyond COVID-19 as well. And we're going to talk about more of that as we move on. So what are the big takeaways for us, big takeaways for qualitative research practitioners and everybody else from what we're seeing just now? One of the first things that I want to talk about really is the fact that, there is very often this temptation to say, or temptation to ask, I need to do a focus group in, say, Delhi, Bombay, Haryana, wherever. What is the technology that I should use? So we actually think that, the framing or the starting point of the conversation should not be on tech tools, but really on the question that we want to address, the outcome that we want to work towards. And from there really comes the next question. So this is my mandate. This is what I want to accomplish. This is what I want to understand. What is the right approach for this? And when I say what is the right approach, I also mean tech tools. What's the right tech tool for this as well? The other thing that we really want to highlight is the fact that digital transition has happened and technology is very critical, but it's not the only important thing. What we're realizing through all this is that the first principles of research are more important today than ever before. So it's really about going back to basics. And the reason why we're saying that is that there are a lot of constraints that digital imposes on us, right? And we need to be much better prepared for these, for the new circumstances. Our discipline, our discussion guides need to be much more engaging, much sharper. Our objectives need to be clearer. The stimulus that we're going to be, checking with consumers need to be sharper. But all of this is what we should have been doing anyway. So therefore, what we're really saying is that back to basics, back to the good old principles of qualitative research, more important than ever before. Another critical aspect that we've noticed is that there is a tendency to shy away from superior technology, because let's use WhatsApp because it's there, everyone has it, it's free, it's the easiest tool to work with. What we really want to say is that there are some tools that are available that are free for all, that is universally accessible, much easily accepted by everybody, but they do not have much of a research functionality. But we really want to look at tools that are being designed for research functionality. There are many tools, and I'm only talking about video conferencing services here, but services that are really designed for stimulus exposure, stimulus markups, voting, all the stuff that we need when we organize field work with consumers. And beyond video conferencing services as well, there are self-ethnography tools, then there are digital whiteboards, there are social listening platforms, there are online forums for pre-work. There are very many tools out there for us to explore and consider. The other thing that I want to talk about is the fact that the dominant narrative around digital today is that it's a compromise because we cannot do face-to-face and therefore digital, or the fact that it's cost and time efficient. It's definitely cost and time efficient, but there are many other advantages as well that we see when we do digital, and I'll let Sharmila talk about this as the next speaker on the Qual playbook. Some of the things that I do want to talk about is the fact that today you can actually access consumers across geographies for one session. Digital does take care of some extroversion bias that you see otherwise. So we definitely do see some advantages. It's a non-intrusive observation process in some cases. Like I said, we'll talk about this more when Sharmila comes on board. Having said all of this, what are some of the guiding principles for us to make digital work for us, right? One of the first things is our moderation techniques. I mean, they really need to evolve because we're looking at a non-face-to-face approach. So our warm-ups, our questions, our projective techniques, they all need to be reimagined in the new age context. There are some specialized tools out there, some apps that can actually help create greater engagement online. We need to access those. Confidentiality becomes a big thing that we need to address as well. NDAs with respondents, moderators, recruiters, all of that becomes important. Also the fact that these are all privately hosted sessions, so who are you providing access to? I mean, the links, all of that will have to be managed with confidentiality in mind. technology trials. And when I say technology trials, I'm really talking about, test runs and training and support and all of that. But I'm also talking about training the respondents and not just the moderators and everybody else. But how do you train, how do you train respondents for troubleshooting? How do you, all of these become extremely critical as well. But having said all of this, the three fundamental principles, perhaps, or guiding principles for us to make digital work better are ethics, sensitivity to the respondents' needs, and finally, the practicality of the process. Moving on, the million-dollar question, which is really what lies ahead of us. I don't think anyone is fully equipped to answer that question just now, and we all fully realize that we're in the middle of the pandemic, and there are many new formations that are happening, many mental models that consumers are using to navigate the near term just now. But we also know that post this, there's going to be a new normal, there's going to be a post-pandemic reality, and some of these formations or mental models that are taking shape just now will crystallize into long-term norms. Some of them are going to fall off the page. So this is really about trying to keep a close watch on the consumer and figure, what's really going to happen as things evolve. Having said all of that, we do know that digital is going to stay, and it is going to be the future of research. And future technologies will only make this even, will only enrich research with many possibilities. However, I also want to say that face-to-face research will have its meaning, especially when you're trying to, when observational insights become very critical, or when collaborative techniques become important, or when you need to access audiences who are not really digitally savvy. I mean, when you need to access audiences, the rural audience, etc., face-to-face will continue to, have relevance. So therefore, all we're saying is let the question decide the method, and let's not get carried away by the method, but let's really focus on the question and then decide the method basis that. So that's all I have. I think I've been able to keep to the 8-minute schedule, and Sharmila can take over.
Yeah, thanks a ton, Anjana. I mean, I think going back to the question I raised, are we geared up? Are we in a place to kind of deliver qual research? I think that needle has moved from what I hear from you to saying that there are new ways of doing things, there are new tools, and we as a community have embraced them, and are producing wonderful research as we speak today. And there are also things that we've learned on what to do and what not to do. Right now, when we kind of think aloud, a logical next question comes to mind. Right. I've always done things in a certain way. I know when I do this, here is a norm I follow, and therefore I can understand whether the situation has changed from that, and and I can benchmark and so on and so forth. Right. I'm used to doing things in a certain way. So when we kind of take that perspective, the way I'm framing this question, and will invite Sharmila, like Anjana, you pointed out, to kind of help us answer that. Is qualitative research a tail version of itself if it is not done face to face? And for all the reasons that I just called out, saying I've always done it this way, I know I have benchmarks, I know how to read it, and so on and so forth. So, Sharmila, over to you. But before I hand over the mic to Sharmila, a quick introduction. Sharmila has been a researcher for as long as she remembers. Her journey in the qualitative insights realm started more than 3 decades ago. Post learning from both quanti and qualitative research, she chose to develop her expertise in qual. She was in charge of qual business for North and South India in the erstwhile Kantar Group prior to starting her own venture 11 years ago. Her mantra has been simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Cannot disagree with that, Sharmila. Over to you. Tell us, are we using a pale version of the original? And if not, why not?
Thanks so much, Sundar. And the question is a very pertinent one. So I don't know why the slide is not moving though.
Okay, I can move it for you, Sharmila. See if, yep.
Yeah, that will be great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. So Anjana just, before my turn came, has actually painted the entire picture for all of you to visualize how qualitative research has risen above the stress caused by the pandemic. And to tell you the truth, online is not really new. However, it has never been the norm. It has not been done by all agencies, not for every client, not for every category. So the question actually gets compounded. Why did it not become a norm? And the answer is, Sundar, I need you to move the slide. Yeah. The reason is that logically, when I was taught qualitative research, I was also told that the basic benefits of qualitative research are very logically hinged on the human connect. So qualitative research is able to go deeper, get articulation which is otherwise not mentioned by the stakeholders. Qualitative research is able to actually connect the dots and build real-time insights. Qualitative research understands the context and then builds it back into understanding attitudes and behaviors. And all of it has the human connect bang in the middle of it. Next slide, please. Yeah, and thus what happens is that the perception that call is incongruous with digital online approach, which will not have the face-to-face human connect, is, you know, a very strong question which comes. And that's not all. Actually, the question and the incredulity about qualitative being good using the digital online approach has many other questions attached with it. Next slide. Yeah. So the questions arise that, okay, so you are going to do this through digital technology, but then how will you understand the non-verbals? How will you read the body language and therefore explore further to reach that unstated or the unthought of insight which you are so used to getting? What about qualitative research using digital in India? Anjana has also referred to it, that yeah, are there certain masses which are sitting in rural areas, lower socioeconomic classes, smaller towns, which are not possible to reach through the digital media? And then again, the same question on contextual variable, how will you understand it if you are not visiting the location, not understanding the situation? Next slide, please. So now that I have hopefully asked all the questions that all of you have about qualitative and the suitability of qualitative using the digital medium, let's go and bust some myths. The first myth. Next slide, please. Yeah. The first myth is actually about, hey, the consumer is not going to be comfortable with digital platform. And on this slide, you see a lot of quantitative numbers. And a lot of quantitative numbers are contrary to the belief that consumers won't be comfortable with digital platform. I'm sure all of you have seen videos which are getting uploaded from Bhagalpur, from Gurkunda Bazaar, from Thrissur, from remotest areas of India, and that all indicates the comfort level which the consumer is reaching because of usage of internet pervading through all sorts of topics that they are engaging with. So therefore, consumer will be comfortable. Second myth, digital platform is going to be restrictive. Anjana also referred to it, that what is the platform that you are going to take? Is that going to be comfortable for the consumer? Let's not forget that consumer, like a superhero, currently has an arsenal of digital platforms. So the consumer is very comfortable texting on one platform, putting the audio bit on another platform, using, uploading, downloading videos on another platform. So Why should qualitative research get restricted by using only one platform? No reason. Consumer is using multiple platforms. In the same research, we can actually do a combination of various platforms to get everything that in normal qualitative research will also be, unearthed. Next slide, please. And the third myth. Researchers and recruiters are conditioned, they are trained to do research in a particular manner. They are not going to be effective when we shift to digital completely. Once again, it's a myth because constantly new protocols are being developed to ensure quality, to get the correct respondents, right from not even recruitment. Before that, how the contact needs to be done. From there, the new protocols start and then they go on. And that's how the recruiters are also getting trained, and they have already been trained. Same goes for the researchers. The retaining and reorientation is no longer for that smaller group of researchers who were using digital platforms for their research. It is now being imparted to every researcher to make them absolutely capable of using digital platforms with the skill building and the training that they are that they are receiving. Therefore, the myths are myths. They are not the reality. Next slide, please. Therefore, let's now talk about the new qualitative playbook, which is emerging because of the pandemic. The pandemic is causing acute distress to every human being on this planet, but there are certain changes which the pandemic is bringing, which actually might be better for the future. So therefore, what is it that qualitative research is going towards? And what I feel is that qualitative research has transitioned from being logical to being logically woke. Now, this is not a jargon that I'm using. Woke is something that in the truest sense, we are seeing happening across various avenues of our life. What is woke? It is about being self-aware. It is about questioning the done thing. So therefore, to all the Sharmilas of this world who were told that qualitative research is being done in this way, because this is the reason why it should be done only in this manner. Question: should it be done in that manner? Is there another way of doing it? And strive for the better. So therefore, the heart of being logically woke in qualitative research is to rewire yourself by over-indexing on one factor, and that one factor is empathy. Next slide, which is my last one actually. Yeah, so from being logical to logically woke, if I'm talking about woke qualitative, what does it entail? It entails taking stock of everything, right from planning to recruitment to skill development and to tools, and therefore being conscious of what is happening in the world, and then including that in our processes, in the manner in which data collection is being done, in the manner in which data is being processed and interpreted. So therefore, in planning, constant surveillance to keep track of the changing lifestyles and the use of technology, so that we are well versed with that. Time taken for projects is going through a complete recalibration. So therefore, being aware of how time can be managed on projects, and the new emerging role of the technology partner. There used to be the researcher, there used to be the recruiter, and now we have this definitive role for the technology partner who has to work hand in hand with the researcher to ensure that the data collection is being done correctly and is not, falling on its face. Similarly, for recruitment, I have already talked about the protocols which are getting developed, and the use of digital platforms which is helping the process. Skill building, Anjana referred to it. I am once again emphasizing on it. It is not only about reading the body language anymore. It is about reading voice language. It is about using your own voice and language effectively. It is about rewiring your art of listening. It is about administering projective techniques through a different kind of a medium, and therefore being aware of what can be done and what cannot be done. It is about not making false promises. And finally, for the tools, yes, as I have told you, the consumer have an arsenal of digital platforms, and therefore they are also pretty conditioned using those platforms, and there could be a very smart use of using what they are already comfortable with. But at the same time, in parallel, there has to be a search for identifying new tools. And why not? Look at Quali has always borrowed from other subjects. This time, let's borrow from education, from project management, from politics. All of these use two-way communication. All of them use digital tools, and I'm sure the Vogue qualitative will be able to utilize all this. So, therefore, Vogue qualitative research, if it is followed, has definitive potential to reclaim what Quali has always been known for, to show the way, to preempt risk, to actually understand and uncover nuances which might look minute but which have very deep impact on businesses, and in tapping into the unspoken. So that's what my contention is in terms of the suitability of qualitative research for the digital kind of age, the tech world that we are all living in. And as a researcher who has now spent a few decades doing research, I'm like absolutely not only awed but delighted that this new avenue has opened up for qualitative research. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sharmila. I mean, coming from somebody who's seen every change happen over the last 3 decades, to hear you say you're delighted with this change tells us how ready we are to step in and answer marketer questions. So what, I mean, we looked at, is Qual really geared? We looked at, is Qual the way to kind of address the questions? And the overwhelming and positive answer in my mind is yes, we are, and yes, we can. Now, with that in mind, I lead on to what should marketers do? And I'm sure there are a number of questions they are seeking to answer. There are a number of questions they are being asked. I mean, if they're insights leaders within large corporations, on what should they be measuring, what should they, kind of look at, learn more about the consumer, and what should the brand? So let me call on Paru to help throw some light on this very question. Paru started her career over 25 years ago in market research. She joined MARG as a qualitative researcher and then moved to Sinovate, donning the hat of both qualitative and quantitative research. She currently heads qualitative research for Kantar South Asia. A dual experience allows her to focus on key business issues of clients, irrespective of methodology. She leads the design thinking team, which enables the client journey from insights to outcome. Of course, as you can see from her journey, she also is a person enjoying contradictions. She's head of qualitative research, but she's a major in finance, loves going out with friends, but is equally comfortable knitting. Well, wow. Over to you, Paru. So what should, brands consider, and how do they connect with their consumers? What questions should they answer? Over to you.
Thank you, Sundar. I'm going to try and take that control. Yeah, it's working with me. We've just heard from Anjana and Sharmila how Qual research is appropriate, is equipped, and is being done today. My talk today is based on all the qualitative work we have done over the last 10 to 12 weeks. And across the interactions, we have distilled and understood the shape of the COVID impact on the Indian consumer. I'm sure you would all agree that while we have been home, it has not always been an ideal haven. Waiting has caused us to live quite intensely. In these times, our response system is shaped by two equal but very powerful forces, introspection and fluidity. Both impact us now and are likely to impact us in the coming future. The immediate reaction to the lockdown was to look within. The pace of living and the pace of soul travel almost caught up with each other, which, according to an old Arabic saying, is the speed of a camel. The world around us slowed down and we slowed down with it. The crisis also forced us to live in the moment, be fluid. As we reclaimed our space and are limited to it, connections took a new shape. Where money was not the currency and did not rule or give any allowances, prudence and immunity really became the most powerful currencies. This interplay of introspection and fluidity is leading us to a very interesting renormalization. Deprivation is redefining us. The essentials and the extras will be revisited, are being revisited today, and will be revisited in the coming future. As expressed, very well expressed by Dave Hollis, in this rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to. Status quo has definitely been challenged and a new change model is emerging. Fluidity implies that absolute prediction of the future is not possible, may not work, but the framework that I'll just take you through can help us now navigate and travel with the consumer. Let's just look at the key paradigms influencing the consumer. First, on the x-axis, we have fluidity, which at one end is resetting the known, and on the other, embracing and getting us quite ready for the unknown. On the y-axis, we have introspection. At one end, it could lead us to be walking alone, but on the other hand, the social persona is also warm, humble, more grounded. It could be the rise of the echoist. All this, let's look at how is it impacting the consumer. There is definitely a new psychology which is emerging. While yesterday is history, both because it has gone by and as we often know, history repeats itself. There is readiness for the unexpected, but there is strong nostalgia for what was there. It's also shaping the personality. It doesn't essentially mean it's swanky new. It could also be resurfacing of traits that had earlier gone dormant. In fact, we see many advertisers like IndiaGate looking at that. While the introspection may have been single, it's definitely not selfish, and it's important to remember that. From a grounded view, we are looking to be better versions of ourselves. The new attitude that is emerging is a balance between being productive as well as being entertained. And finally, leading to new behavior, and new relationships with our known landscape. That could be our homes, our city, our office, etc. And in the absence of others, we may be alone, but it needn't be lonely. With a backdrop of this, let's look at what it means for brands. Brands also need to introspect at the same time and rewrite their narratives basis the evolving need-want matrix. The immediate call to action of the brands was fourfold. There are many, many examples. I'm just going to take one to just illustrate the point. Let's look at the first one, solve and not just sell. This implies focus all efforts on finding appropriate and meaningful solutions to the problems people are facing today. A great example was Cipla partnering with food delivery aggregators to leverage the logistics for delivery of medicines. In recent times, we have seen in some states alcohol do the same. The second one is don't rise, do your part, don't be silent. This is a sharp ask from the brands. Brands can play a vital role using their resources and creativity to make a difference. One of the examples is Hero MotoCorp, which provided custom-built mobile ambulances and really did their part. The third ask is don't have to act alone. Make people your partners. There is strength in collaboration. Truly helping people during this crisis requires a journey of forces. A great example was Uber reaching out with their plea to contribute to the driver fund in recent times. Lastly, communicate with positive intent. Reassure with affirmative brand actions about embracing a new normal. Help design new codes of connections. Nike with Play Inside, Play for the World very well expressed that. Now, this while was the immediate consumer asked, let's see finally what role brands can play in the coming times. In the renormalization journey, brands will be called upon to play different roles. The key task of the marketer would be to create meaning. The questions that we should be asking ourselves as marketers are, how can the brand play a role in consumers' mental and physical well-being? What values should the brand stress on to be aspirational in the post-COVID world? Secondly, to be real. This is a really important one. It is to be authentic, transparent, even vulnerable. Flawlessness was suspect even before COVID. It is now much, much stronger. The role the brands would have to play is to uphold real consumer vignettes, be part of them, celebrate small joys of life, and be part of the simple moments of everyday life. The third aspect is to be humane. The introspection that we talked about earlier is leading to a more real, inclusive consumer who not only shows responsibility to self, but also larger ecosystem. And finally, and this is a really critical one, is to curate experiences for the consumer. Our horizon has shrunk in the current circumstances, and we will lean on brands to build our experiences. The experiences are not novelty based, but those which provide true meaning and value and resonate with the consumers. Thank you for attending this webinar, and I hope it has brought the consumer a little bit more alive for you. Back to you, Sundar. Thank you.
Thanks, Paru. The words that stuck to my mind are the need to be fluid and obviously create new meanings that we can associate with, and so can consumers to brands. And keeping that fluidity in mind, and I'm just making an announcement that I forgot to earlier. There's a chat window that all of you as participants have access to. If you have questions for any of the panelists, feel free to type them in. You don't need to wait till the end. Keep typing on, and we would kind of get to the Q&A towards the end of the session. We'll try to answer as many as possible, but those that we can't, we will answer those and post it up in the MRSI website for you to kind of, connect with and read through. So with that context of fluidity and needing to create new meanings, and I think to borrow again from Paru's words, we also need to understand consumers better. How are consumers thinking through this situation? How are consumers making their decisions in this new normal? And let's pose this question to Priya. Priya is the CEO of Ormax Compass. She's an active ESOMAR India rep and a managing committee member of the MRSI, the Marketing Research Society of India. She spent over 25 years at Ormax in the art of understanding consumers and is a mom and a kids expert. Wow, that's truly remarkable. A true explorer at heart, she has varied interests ranging from trekking, adventure sports like scuba diving and snorkeling, theater, poetry, baking, visiting museums, and ancient historical sites. So Priya, over to you. Tell us, what do our consumers thinking? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I want to say a big thank you to you, Sundar, for posing this question, a very relevant question and the need of the hour, and all those attending and the lovely presenters who have been with me before who set the context. But before I get into the thick of things, I just want to share the whole lockdown was about war and battlefront against the pandemic. And we all know that it was in the month of March, April, and May. And when we look at June, I don't know, this is a sense that I have been building and conversations with all my partners and team at Ormax. We're just feeling this phase of recovery. And as a result of that, you will see that our approach, agility, and adaptiveness to the new normal is going to be something which is going to be a recurring conversation, not a month away, but every week. And I want to say, Anjana brought up the $1 million question. There is no crystal ball for us to gaze at and make predictions. But the best thing and the small micro wins, and I've taken a leap from Carl, psychologist, where he talks to companies and team members. Can we take the small micro wins and use it for our businesses to create meaningful experiences? Somebody is fiddling with the slides. Okay. And I was talking about Carl Wick and the small micro wins, and how can we use that to shape our meaningful experiences for brands. And for that, we need to invest in understanding what the consumer is, what he's thinking and feeling. And it's crucial for brands to stay relevant. And I want to say, marketing guys, it's not only your rule book has changed, but the rule book for consumers has changed. And that's what Paru alluded to by saying that the psychology has changed. What's the new psychology? What's the new behavior? And the algorithm has changed. And we all know that we are creatures of habit, right? Our mind creates all these mental shortcuts. 80% of our decisions are autopilot mode. But what happened during lockdown? It was not the same. Consumer habits have changed. We're far more good at exploring. We're willing to try that new brand of cheese that was not available, your regular brand, but you're willing to try another brand. What happens to the heuristics? Do negative emotions make you think of the possible downsides of a decision than the possible gains? We've all heard the loss aversion theory. How difficult are we going to be to take out that 5-10 rupees during this recession time and uncertainty? And I want you to bring it to the retail environment perspective, because I think the malls have opened, shops have opened, and we are feeling a little buoyant. So what are the two big factors that are going to play in our life and the consumer's life? My first point is the whole contactless world. And I'm sure you've seen these images with the face masks, social distancing, staying 6 feet away. How does that pan out for the consumer? And I want to bring it out with two examples. I'm a woman and I love my lipstick, I love my creams, and I wanted to talk about a brand called Body Shop. I've just taken that as an example. It works on sensorials, right? Some of us who use the brand or have tried it or walked to the shop, you know, the girls cajole you to try the new flavored body lotions. They massage it into your hand. What's going to happen in this new contactless world? And this conversation came up with Jamina Menon, who is also a retail expert. Will they provide us sachets to try out the new innovations and fruit flavors? What about the banana flavored one or the mango flavored one? I'm not going to try it out on whims and fancies. Will there be a chamber which gives me a visual, visceral experience of the new product? My second example is also something close to our heart right now, because all of us are on Zoom calls and Zoom quarantine fatigue. But if you wanted your chasma made and you waited and lockdown happened, how is that going to pan out during this time? Can they take an image of your face? Can they suggest what spectacles suit you? Can they deliver it to your home? Can there be an online assisted help? Okay, if you still want to go to the store, can there be a face recognition software, voice technology? Because all the time at the back of your mind, you want to spend minimal time and the least amount of contact. And that is so primed in our mind. And that leads me to my second point, which I want to talk about, is safety needs. And the good old Maslow's hierarchy, right? If you don't have your basics in order and balance, if you don't have your safety and security, you're not going to worry about your other needs of self-esteem and love and belonging. And remember, some of us are privileged to work at home, and I want to thank Sharmila Das for bringing out this point. What happens to people who have to go out and earn our living? How will this affect mobility? And look, I'm using the word mobility and I'm not talking about the automotive industry. And this word mobility is something that needs to stick in our mind. How are we going to change the way we travel? And this came from an interaction with a man that I spoke to from Nasik, who was the sole breadwinner of the family. I want you to put yourself in his shoes. Was happy using the public transport to go to work. What is he going to do? Trust the local transport to work? Is he going to rely on the Ubers and the Olas? Or will he buy a new car? Or will he buy a used car? There are no answers, my friend. There is no answers that I'm going to give you. But what I could do, and what we've done as a team, is painted the different scenarios that can happen. But before I do that, on the 14th of May, this was something that Hyundai put up. People will shun shared mobility after the lockdown. And they were talking about a subscription model, leasing model, and the used car business. Who's to know? But we got to start now. We got to pivot now. We've got to adapt now. We need to get our technology in place now. So what are the possible scenarios that I see? And if I have to look at mobility, the first thing I think is something absolutely important is non-essential trips, and encourage people to work from home, those who can. Can we encourage cycling and creating cycling tracks? All the talk of wanting to do that, now is a good time. Can there be an app which tells you the number of passengers already in the bus, or better still, make a reservation on the bus? It's super important. Cable cars, I'm sure some of us have traveled in that. Can I have my mini sanitized car van? Each person is isolated 6 feet away. Can I have a connected car? And I think this is a feature that will become important in the next 1.5 years to come. Monitor temperature, oxygen level, sanitize the car every hour. And some of us are planning to go to work are already thinking like this. These are some of the scenarios that I have painted. I'm sure there are many more. What I want to leave you with this quote that I picked up, and I'm thank God that I read this in the Economic Times. Tech is a life jacket that will help us stay afloat and help us design the new normal. While we're trying to understand the consumer lens, what is very, very important is to also understand the mirror of the medium understanding. Everybody's talking digitization, tech. Have we got it? It's going to go off at an accelerated pace in the next few months. And my last slide, which I always believe that for brands to stay relevant, they need to understand the emotional and psychological headspace of the consumer. And when I talk about social distancing, it's not a physical distancing, it is a psychological warfare in our mind. And we need to understand that from the consumer and at a close basis. How can we help the consumer achieve these small wins that I spoke about? I know if priests were marrying people over video conference, not a novelty. People had plans for that, right? How are restaurants selling groceries along with the takeout meals? These small wins, my friend, I want you to leave with this one thought as brand, marketing, and even the research fraternity. Can we have these small wins which will ignite joy, create engagement, create meaningful experiences, and creativity in the consumer? And I want to share an example which happened with me last week. Burger King, out of the blues, when I looked at it early morning, really charmed my heart. It spoke to me as a woman in the kitchen, the home cook, trying out my tandoori recipes and my bread pudding, which also turns out sometimes like a dead pudding. It was quirky, it was fun. It was not about the free Whopper. But what it did was it touched my heart. It spoke to me as a woman. It brought in the humaneness of conversations. And as Paru said, while we're creating these meaningful experiences, we need to be real. We need to make it humane. We need to make it relevant. It is not tokenism. And that's what I want to share with you. And thank you for attending. And it has been an enlightening session.
Thanks, Priya. We started this webinar with Anjana speaking to us about, our readiness to kind of deliver qual research and insights via qual research. Sharmila came along and burst some myths and said, think of it very differently. Think of woke and be ready for change. Paru spoke to us about what brands need to start thinking about to engage in this new normal with their consumers. And Priya very nicely rounded it off with the emotional and psychological aspects of consumers. And we all know that emotions are, the underpinning of humankind's existence and progress. And I'm sure that applies to brands as well. Now that we have a sense of our readiness, which is really where we started, we think we are ready and charged to go. And with all the thinking and our processes and tools geared to kind of work in this new normal and new situation. And then the question is, has it actually worked? What have we done? What have we learned? So let me pose this question to Madhulika, and she would come and make some of the things that we spoke of earlier and kind of bring it to life with entertainment as a context and speak to us about category erosion. Obviously, we know all our categories, all the brands that we work with have faced business challenges. And she's going to tell us, how do we need to understand it and how do we need to address it. Now, before I hand over to her, let me do a quick introduction. Madhulika founded Dragonfly with a simple and clear vision of being the consumer insights partner clients would trust for their qualitative research needs. For the last 12 years, Dragonfly has partnered with clients across BFSI, media, automotive, FMCG, retail, and many, many more, and has delivered insightful work that has helped forge deep and long-lasting relationships. So Madhulika, over to you. Tell us, I know entertainment is consumer is a finicky character, can switch pretty easily if it's entertainment. There is so much content to choose from. What did we pick up and handing over to you to bring to life some key points that each of our panelists spoke early on. Over to you, Madhulika.
So one of the things,
Madhulika, could you check your microphone? You're not very audible.
Okay, better?
Better, just speak into the mic if you can.
Sure, okay. So absolutely, I mean, say is that I would want to end the webinar, with a proof of concept, and what I'm putting forward is something I'm hoping which will help move the argument. So category erosion is a fear that lies across many categories, both paid, many people, alcohol, drinking outside now is not as permissible, and of course in the entertainment space, television specifically, with new content.
Madhulika, sorry to interrupt. You might want to, if you're on a hands-free, get the mic closer to your mouth, speak into it. Your voice is still breaking.
Is it any better?
No.
Marginally better. Yeah, go on, sorry.
So, as I said, I would want to end the webinar with a proof of concept, and I'll be talking specifically about entertainment. And the fear of GC, and especially in television, has always been that there's OTT content, consumers are increasingly getting into the digital space, and television will be impacted. GC will be impacted. Now that fear has been there for a long time, and it was, of course, accelerated when the lockdown happened because fresh content was not being produced. So with that context, there is a lot of fear of category erosion. Now what happened, of course, is something that I would want to kind of take you through, is when we look at the various channels which are out there, and we see what everybody put out. Of course, DD with mythology was something that you know. The three channels which actually suffered the most was Star Plus, ZTV.
Sorry again, Madhulika. It's the audio is pretty bad. Would you want to change mics if you have one, or try a different position if you're connected via Wi-Fi?
Is this any better?
Yeah, I mean, it waves in a bit. I mean, as in it's better, and then it kind of goes off. Yeah.
Okay. So let me just be trying to be as clear as loud as possible. So interestingly, what happened when the lockdown happened is the three leaders were one that fell the most, which is essentially Stars and Colors, and your other channels did pretty okay. Now that's very interesting because your leaders are supposed to be kind of in control, know their consumer, know their needing the best. Of course, there was rethinking. There is a strategy version 2.0 is what I would say, and they brought in different kind of content which kind of worked. It was largely in the mythology space, of course, with some amount of comedy thrown in as well. Is this better, Sundar?
Slightly better, Madhulika, but it's still a bit of a challenge. We'll have to really listen in to hear you. Yeah, but go on.
Okay. So if you look at Genesis in terms of, actually there was a key point that I wanted to make. So one thing, of course, we understood was that OTT content doesn't work on television, and everybody was betting big on OTT because we got in OTT shows of our Balaji. Star was showing a lot of Hotstar shows, but that's something that did not work on television. The other thing, of course, we realized was there were two clear winners. One was mythology, and the other was comedy. So if we go back to Genesis in terms of what is GC, GC stands for General Entertainment Channel, as the nomenclature suggests. It's meant to be a family entertainment channel. The reality, however, is that over the last 2 decades, GC has become more of a women's entertainment space. And all your three leaders have veered more into that kind of a space. It's become very women-skewed content. And of course, what happens when women and children stay at home and lockdown happens? The rules are very different. The rule that you've been playing by is not really relevant anymore. And that's possibly the reason why there was maximum erosion with those channels. So the questions that arose, of course, is that why doesn't OTT content work on television? Who's controlling the remote in the house? The fear that it takes from one base to break the habits of people are off GC content for 3 months, 4 months, when they come back to television, and of course, what's the relevance of TV going forward? And how do I get my consumer back when I have fresh shows? So, for example, when Star Plus is trying to launch a show called Anupama, but maybe that might not be a good show to launch post-lockdown, which is all about, housewives and her plight. And we've seen the women really come into the fray in a stronger way during COVID times, to the extent where I feel that they have been the Karkas in a lot of households. So from a research standpoint, what we did at Dragonfly is that we worked on multiple fronts. One is that we migrated traditional methodologies to online. And the other was that we also deployed a lot of new tech-enabled methodologies. So essentially, we used our digital diary platform, DigiLive, which we started deploying from the month of April. Over the next 3 months, we've been working with that. And some of our learnings, which is corroborating what the other speakers have spoken about, is that NCC's AB consumers are very adept at using mobile phones. Largely, we did work with women, so you can well imagine the kind of teaching we went to, of course, what with men, children, etc. as well. The lockdown monotony is something that people look for a break, and participating in research is a good break in that sense. And of course, the other point is that observation too is possible. It's not just conversations, you can also do observations too. And we came out from the exercise quite confident that we delivered well. So starting in terms of what have been the key insights that we have gleaned from the work that we did. What is the OTT content? Why does it not work on TV? And this is the million-dollar question that everybody wants to answer for, really. Technically, these are two very different spaces. One is a collective space. It's more about relatability, which is the fight through really. The pace is slower. The characterization, narratives are black and white on television. Whereas when you look at OTT, it's more individualistic. The key thing out here is distinctive content. The pace is faster. There are shades of grey. You can explore that. It's more about realism and grittiness. So the two spaces can actually coexist very beautifully because each has a separate group. So that's one question answered. Moving to the other, is that the preferences in GC have altered. In the past, pre-lockdown, it was largely the women's saga. As I said, the category from GC had become WBC. So it was women empowerment, romance largely, and mythology. The whole family space was more moderate. It was a flip that happened during lockdown period, and we foresee that actually carrying on for a long time. So what actually you see happening is the role of GC has changed in people's lives. So that really, I would say, is the key takeout. It's going back to where it started. And the leaders in the category, which is Star Plus, Colors, ZTV, need to approach their content and their marketing playbook in a very, very different manner going forward. So the two guideposts emerging from this really is that from being a women-centric category, it's moved to being family-centric. And I would really say that that's really true for a lot of other categories as well. I mean, this whole family centricity space has always been very big in India, but even more so now. I think all of us have felt it in the last few months as well. The other thing, of course, is there's a whole host of new emerging need states as well, which we bring down. And these are also in sync with what we see happening in our lives and in these COVID times. So the role of the category has shifted, and also the new need states which have emerged as well. And I feel that any brand which reinforces this, the whole family centricity, will play a key role in bonding the family together. We have a key way forward also. And television really, and GC especially, is at the heart of this. So the role of GC, the role of television actually is very central in the Indian family space. And we've seen that when you have content like Tarak, you have content like Mahabharat, Ramayana, people congregate in large numbers to watch it. I mean, the breakout numbers we've had, the breakaway numbers we've had is proof of that. So I think we've spoken about the whole women centricity, moving to family centricity. The category, the role of the category has shifted. The other thing I would like to talk about is the new emerging need states. And there are 4 that I have pinned down from all the work that we did in the last 2 months. One is the comfort reassurance space. It's very dark. The outside is very dark. People want comfort, people need reassurance, and mythology comes in a big way. The value reinforcement that mythology does is immense. The other thing, of course, is that as life becomes more difficult, escapism comes up as a very big way, and that's where comedy fits in. So Tarak, Kaplan, Bhabiji, all of that comes in, and we've seen the numbers there as well. The other state I would want to talk about is simplicity. And that's something we've seen in our lives as well. And similarly for television, content is still relevant. A good story, well told, can pass the test of time. 30-year-old content will still be watched. So it can be devoid of glitz and glamour, but people will still come. And happiness is a key requirement, So people need to evoke happy memories, especially when times are difficult. Nostalgia is a key way, of course, you've seen, but there are many other ways of doing that too. So these are the key emerging lead states, and we're going to see the televisions and what about that. Sorry. So I want to leave you with a few words of advice. One is that there's a consumer reset taking place, and we need to be very cognizant of that. We need to journal the consumer, because all the answers will not come later. We need to journey with the consumer around onwards. Also, more agile and leaner consumer research will be required because budgets are shrinking. Everybody's sales is under duress. And the other thing, of course, is that one requires a research roadmap. One needs to be doing some work now, some work later. So how do you divide that becomes very important. I've given some example. This. What I would really want to leave you with is that after having done this piece of work, I really feel that we managed to solve some very strategic problems. We managed to give some very good answers to the clients, answers which help them in the interim period and possibly will help them going forward as well. So I would really want to leave you with a question, and if you can just answer that based on, it's not a poll, but nevertheless, based on what I have shared, do you believe that qualitative research conducted online was able to deliver on the strategic ask in the media space? Yes and no. Keep it up, and this is where I would want to end it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Madhulika. We had a challenge with your voice carrying through, but I guess whatever we could listen in and the content already on the slides gave us some sense. But I guess it was a bit of a shame that we couldn't hear you fully through. But I have no doubt that the participants believe that qualitative research conducted online, can deliver to the strategic ask. Is how I would think participants would think of, looking at everything that we've heard on this webinar. So thank you very much. Thanks again to all our panelists, Anjana, Sharmila, Paru, Priya, and Madhulika yourself. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for shedding competitive colors and coming together to tell us how, as a qualitative research industry, we have moved the needle to deliver the insights that many of our marketer community friends are seeking. So, given that we've run a bit over time, it would be good if participants can email in your questions, or if you've already put it in the chat window, we will respond to that. So keep the questions coming. And before we kind of say thank you again to all our participants, I would like to kind of bring up the upcoming webinars so that you can log in time. There's a limit, there are only 500 people at any time who can log in. We've just got messages saying a lot of people who wanted to join this webinar could not connect. So be there, be first to be listening in. Coming up on the 17th of this month, we have Madhav Srinivasan speaking about Anybody Can Hack Digital, more on how our industry is embracing digital ways of delivering insights. Following that session, we have coming up on the 24th, similar to the qualitative playbook and the new marketing context for qualitative that we discussed today. Coming up is the quantitative research playbook on the 24th of June. We have Abhinav Mohan, Murlidhar Salvatiswaran, Raja Bunet, and Ravi Kumar Narayanan joining us from InMobi, Kantar, Ipsos, and Dynata, respectively. Look forward to meeting you, meeting a number of you again in this set of webinars coming up. Thank you, and a very good afternoon. Thanks for taking time to join us. Panelists, Madhulika, Priya, Paru, Sharmila, and Anjana, thanks a lot again. And thanks a lot, MRSI. Good day, good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.